Researchers at Harvard once tracked thousands of people over 75 years, the longest study on happiness ever recorded. Do you know what they discovered? It wasn't money, power, or even perfect health that gave people a meaningful life. It was renewal, the ability to change, to forgive, to begin again when everything seemed broken. I think of a man I once knew, successful on the outside, but inside, crushed by guilt and regret. He told me, "It feels like my life ended years ago, but my body kept moving." That kind of quiet despair is more common than we realize. And yet, there is a greater truth. Endings are not the last word. There is a force, a divine hand, that can breathe new life into the most hopeless heart. That is where transformation begins. Every human being, no matter how old or young, feels at some point the deep pull for a fresh beginning. A child who struggles with a learning difficulty longs to be seen for more than a test score. A teenager who faces rejection wishes for a chance to start over with a clean slate. An adult burdened by financial mistakes or broken relationships aches for another opportunity to rebuild what was lost. An elderly person facing the quiet of retirement may wonder if their days of significance are behind them, and deep down, they long to feel that their story is not yet finished. This longing is not cultural. It is not bound by wealth or geography. It is written into the human soul, like a watermark placed there by the Creator. The writer C.S. Lewis once observed that if we find within ourselves desires that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most reasonable explanation is that we were made for another world. That simple truth hits like a bell tolling across a silent valley. People chase wealth, applause, new gadgets, promotions, vacations, and even relationships, but none of these fill the restless hunger that stirs within us. It is not wrong to enjoy good things, yet they do not address the ache that whispers when we are alone. The hunger is for renewal, for life itself to feel fresh and alive again. People sense deep down that they were meant for more than mere survival, more than the dull rhythm of repeating the same mistakes. Science itself testifies to this inner longing. Psychologists who study motivation have discovered that human beings thrive when they feel growth is possible. Stagnation breeds depression. When a person believes they are stuck in a permanent state, hopelessness begins to creep in, often leading to mental and even physical decline. On the other hand, when someone senses that change is within reach, energy surges, creativity rises, and healing begins. A study conducted by Stanford University revealed that people who believe their personality and character can develop over time are more resilient when facing setbacks. The belief in renewal is not just a theological idea, it is a scientifically measurable source of strength. Think of the power of spring after a long winter. The trees appear lifeless, the ground hardened, the air heavy with silence. Then slowly, green begins to press its way through the soil, buds appear, and color floods the landscape. This is not just a metaphor for nature, it mirrors the deep rhythm within human lives. People can endure winters of the soul, long stretches where nothing seems to grow, but they are built with an expectation that spring will come. That is why despair feels unnatural, like a foreign intruder. That is why stories of new beginnings resonate so powerfully, because they strike a chord with the design etched into our hearts. Take, for example, a teenager in the United States today, struggling with identity, burdened by the pressure of grades, social expectations, and a constant comparison culture fueled by social media. That teenager often feels trapped in an endless cycle of not being good enough. When that young person hears the possibility of new life, not just improvement, but complete renewal, something awakens. Their shoulders lift, their eyes brighten, because the soul responds to hope like lungs respond to oxygen. Or think of the 45-year-old parent who feels the crushing weight of financial mistakes, past choices, or broken trust. They may walk through life smiling politely, but inside, they carry a heavy ledger of regrets. When they hear that they can start again, that they are not defined by yesterday's failures, their entire nervous system relaxes. Even the body responds to hope. Medical research shows that forgiveness and fresh purpose reduce blood pressure, calm the immune system, and lengthen life expectancy. The longing for renewal is not fantasy. It is woven into both spirit and body. The elderly, too, feel this deep desire. A person who has lived 7 decades may wonder if renewal is still possible. The culture often whispers that their best years are behind them. Yet stories abound of people who begin entirely new journeys late in life. A grandmother who starts painting at 70, creating art that touches thousands. A grandfather who takes up marathon walking at 68, and inspires younger generations. Renewal is not limited by age, because the hunger for life remains active as long as breath is within us. That hunger is the soul reminding us that there's always more ahead than behind when we walk with the God of new beginnings. Lewis often wrote that Christianity is not about making bad people good, but about making dead people alive. That statement may sound severe at first, but it captures the essence of the longing we are describing. People do not merely want minor adjustments to their habits. They crave a rebirth, a radical turning of the page, a dawn after the longest night. That is why self-help books, while useful, rarely satisfy for long. They offer strategies for rearranging the furniture in a room when the house itself is collapsing. People need more than rearrangement. They need renovation. Psychology reinforces this truth in a profound way. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, observed that people can endure unimaginable suffering if they believe that life still holds meaning. Renewal is the recovery of meaning. When someone discovers that their story is not finished, that God Himself offers them a fresh chapter, their will to live and to thrive surges back to life. This is why so many who encounter spiritual renewal describe it as being born again, as if their lungs are filled with air for the first time. Think of water. It is ordinary, clear, common. Yet to the thirsty, it is life itself. When someone walks through a desert of failure, despair, or regret, the promise of new life is like a spring breaking open in the sand. They drink, and their strength returns. In faith traditions across the world, water is used as a symbol of cleansing and beginning anew. Baptism in Christianity, ritual washings in Judaism and Islam, and purification ceremonies in countless cultures all point to the same longing. People yearn to be washed clean, to step forward free of the past. A story often told in churches across America is that of John Newton, the writer of Amazing Grace. Newton was once a slave trader, complicit in the cruelest practices of human history. Yet, after encountering God's grace, his life was utterly transformed. He did not merely feel sorry for his past. He became a new man, dedicating his life to fighting against the very evil he once advanced. His story endures centuries later, not because he was perfect, but because his life testifies to the universal longing for renewal and the astonishing reality that it is possible. Science again affirms this transformation. Neuroscientists speak of neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself, creating new pathways and habits. Old destructive patterns can be weakened, and new healthy ones can take root. Faith amplifies this process because it engages the mind, the heart, and the spirit at once. When someone believes they are forgiven and empowered by God, their very brain chemistry changes. Dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin levels shift, producing not just emotional relief, but measurable health improvements. Renewal is both spiritual and biological. This longing also explains why stories of redemption dominate our culture. Films, novels, and songs that capture the theme of a person starting anew consistently top charts and win awards. Audiences cheer when the addict recovers, when the broken marriage is healed, when the fallen hero rises again. These stories do more than entertain. They echo the deepest truth of human existence, that we are not trapped by what we have been. We are built for transformation. Yet there's also a darker side to this longing. When it is unmet, despair takes root. People who believe they can never change often slide into destructive patterns, substance abuse, bitterness, isolation, even self-destruction. The prison of hopelessness is one of the most painful places a person can inhabit. That is why the message of new life is not optional, it is urgent. It rescues people from drowning in a sea of regret and lifts them onto the solid ground of possibility. Children understand this intuitively. Watch a child fall while learning to ride a bicycle. Tears may come, but within minutes the child is climbing back on, believing instinctively that they can start again. Adults often lose this natural resilience. Life's disappointments weigh heavier as years pass, and cynicism whispers that change is impossible. Yet the longing for renewal never disappears. It may be buried beneath layers of disappointment, but it pulses beneath the surface, waiting for hope to strike like a match in the dark. Communities, too, feel this longing. Cities scarred by violence, families broken by betrayal, nations torn apart by division, all ache for renewal. The same principle applies on both the personal and the collective level. People are wired to believe that things can be made new. Without that belief, communities collapse under the weight of despair. With it, they rise, rebuild, and flourish again. History is filled with revivals, reformations, and renaissances sparked by the simple conviction that a fresh beginning is possible. This longing is more than psychological survival. It is divine design. The God who spoke galaxies into being also whispers into human souls that they are not finished yet. When a person stands in front of a sunrise, colors streaking the horizon after the black of night, something deep within stirs. That something is the echo of eternity, the reminder that no matter how long the night has been, morning always comes. Renewal is not a luxury, it is the rhythm of creation itself. For someone listening today, this may not feel abstract at all. Perhaps you feel like that teenager crushed by expectation, that parent weighed by regret, or that elder wondering if purpose has passed you by. The good news is that the longing for renewal in your heart is not a cruel trick. It is the fingerprint of God pointing you to the truth that new life is possible. You were made for more than existence. You were made for transformation. And the very hunger you feel is the first sign that renewal is already at work within you. A life truly changed is not the same as a life slightly improved. There is a vast difference between tidying up the corners of one's existence and being remade from the inside out. People often approach transformation as if it were nothing more than a self-improvement project. Change a habit here, adopt a new morning routine there, eat better, or get a gym membership. These things have value, but they do not reach into the deepest caverns of the human soul. A person who feels hollow can drink green smoothies and run marathons and still go to bed at night wondering why they feel empty. True transformation comes from a source greater than self-discipline. It comes from God. The mystery of transformation is that it does not begin with the human will straining to change. It begins with grace. When God steps into a life, He does not polish the surface. He recreates the very foundation. The caterpillar does not take a class on how to become a butterfly. It enters a cocoon and emerges something utterly different. The old self gives way to the new, not through self-effort alone, but through a divine process that rewrites the very essence of life. There are people who walk through decades trying to alter their lives by sheer willpower. They quit smoking and then find themselves drinking. They fix their finances and then destroy their relationships. They build perfect careers and then collapse emotionally under the weight of loneliness. Human willpower alone is a fragile tool. Science confirms this. Studies on self-control reveal that willpower functions like a muscle. It can be exercised, but it also fatigues. People can push themselves for a season, but when stress mounts or tragedy strikes, the strength to resist old patterns often collapses. Something stronger is needed, something unbreakable. That is where God enters. Transformation in the truest sense is not cosmetic, it is resurrection. A person who has lived in the grip of addiction can tell you that the moment of change was not when they read the right book or attended the right seminar. The moment of change was when something beyond themselves, something divine, touched them with hope that they were not forever chained. That spark of hope often comes when people cry out to God, whether in whispered prayers at midnight, in quiet tears in a car, or in desperate confessions to a friend. God has a way of meeting people in the hidden places where their masks fall and their true need is laid bare. Transformation also aligns with science in remarkable ways. Neuroscientists who study the brain's ability to change describe the phenomenon of neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself, building new pathways with repeated practice and belief. When faith enters the equation, belief takes on a supernatural dimension. A person who believes that God Himself is helping them does not only practice new habits, but sustains them with renewed energy. Brain scans of individuals who pray regularly show increased activity in regions linked to self-control, compassion, and resilience. Faith is not just a spiritual comfort, it rewires biology. One of the most striking examples is the life of a man who once spent years drowning in alcohol. He had tried dozens of programs, countless resolutions, and promises to his family, yet nothing stuck. He would do well for a month, then relapse, each time sinking deeper into shame. His transformation began one night when, exhausted by failure, he cried out, "God, if you are real, change me." That night did not erase his struggle instantly, but marked the first time he began to walk with a strength not his own. He discovered a community of faith, found new courage through prayer, and slowly his brain and heart were rewired. Today, he has been free for 2 decades, mentoring others who are trapped in the same chains that once bound him. His story illustrates what countless others can testify. Transformation anchored in God does what self-help alone cannot. The reason divine transformation is different is because it addresses not only behavior but identity. People are not changed by simply telling themselves to do better. They are changed when they see themselves differently. The addict who still calls himself worthless will return to his chains. The person who feels unlovable will sabotage relationships even if they attend therapy. God speaks a new identity over His children. He calls them beloved. He calls them forgiven. He calls them renewed. That shift in identity transforms behavior more powerfully than any lecture or resolution ever could. Psychologists who study behavior confirm this principle. People who adopt a new identity sustain habits far more effectively than those who simply set goals. Someone who says, "I am trying to quit smoking," rarely succeeds as often as the one who says, "I am not a smoker anymore." When God declares that someone is made new, they begin to live out of that new identity. The behavior follows the belief. The fruit follows the root. This is not to say transformation is without struggle. Even a butterfly must push hard against the walls of its cocoon to strengthen its wings. Faith does not remove the effort, but infuses it with purpose and strength. God does not do the work for us as if we were puppets. He partners with us, supplying the grace to persevere, the courage to resist, and the wisdom to choose differently. A new path requires both divine power and human cooperation. One of the great lies of modern culture is that people are trapped by their genetics or their past. The message often whispered is, "You will always be like this. This is who you are." That lie has destroyed countless lives. Yet research continually shows that genes are not destiny, and the past does not dictate the future. People can rewrite their narratives. Families marked by cycles of abuse or poverty can birth new generations defined by healing and strength. Transformation happens when people open themselves to a greater source of power than the one that failed them before. That source is God Himself, the one who breathes life into dust and calls dead things to rise. Transformation also involves community. God often works through relationships, placing people around us who challenge, support, and remind us of our new identity. Science affirms this as well. People who attempt to change in isolation relapse far more than those who change with the support of a group. Faith communities, from churches to recovery circles, provide a place where new identities are reinforced, where encouragement replaces shame, and where accountability strengthens resolve. God transforms not only individuals, but entire circles of connection. There is a beauty in transformation stories that resonates across every age. A teenager who turns from destructive peers to positive influences. A middle-aged worker who leaves behind toxic ambition to live with integrity. An elder who once carried bitterness, choosing forgiveness and finding peace in their final years. These stories matter because they reveal that no stage of life is beyond God's power to remake. As long as a person has breath, the possibility of transformation remains. Consider also the dimension of purpose. Transformation is not simply about breaking free from bad habits, it is about stepping into a calling. People come alive when they discover that their lives matter beyond their own survival. God's transformation often redirects a life, turning pain into a platform for healing others. The former addict becomes a mentor. The survivor of loss becomes a comforter to the grieving. The one who once lived selfishly begins to serve with joy. Transformation always ripples outward. It is not self-centered, it is generative, spilling over to touch others with life. Stories of transformation stir something primal within us because they reveal that change is possible in even the darkest places. The Apostle Paul, once a persecutor, became the champion of the very faith he tried to destroy. Augustine, a man trapped in lust and chaos, became one of history's greatest thinkers on God's grace. Modern testimonies of people who go from prison to leadership, from hatred to reconciliation, from despair to joy, echo the same truth. When God is the source, transformation is not just a possibility, it is reality. Science continues to show that belief in God correlates with lower anxiety, higher resilience, and greater hope. Psychologists speak of the placebo effect, where belief alone can cause measurable improvements in health. Faith is not a placebo, it is belief grounded in reality. Yet it demonstrates the same principle. What people believe about their source of strength directly shapes their outcomes. To believe that God is with you is to step into a current of strength far greater than your own. Transformation is also deeply mysterious. It cannot be charted like a formula or packaged neatly into steps. Two people may walk similar paths, and one may change instantly while the other wrestles for years. Yet both testify that God was at work, patient and steady, drawing them into new life. This unpredictability frustrates those who want quick fixes, but it also preserves the truth that transformation is relational, not mechanical. God is not a vending machine. He is a father who shapes each child uniquely. For someone listening now, the thought of transformation may feel far away. You may have tried and failed so many times that hope itself feels dangerous. You may wonder if people like you ever truly change. The truth is that transformation is not a reward for the strong. It is a gift for the broken. God's strength is made perfect in weakness. The very place where you feel most powerless may become the stage for the greatest transformation. Picture the seed buried in the soil. To the outside eye, it appears dead, forgotten, lost. Yet in the hidden darkness, life is stirring. Roots dig downward, shoots press upward, and one day, green breaks through the dirt. That is what transformation looks like. It may begin unseen, buried in prayer, in small acts of faith, in quiet choices no one applauds. Then one day, the fruit emerges and everyone marvels. That seed did not change itself by willpower alone. It was transformed by the life placed within it. Transformation sourced in God is not a dream reserved for saints or spiritual elites. It is the invitation extended to every heart that longs for more. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming alive. The broken are made whole, the weary are given rest, the fearful are given courage, and the hopeless are filled with light. That is the miracle of divine transformation. Fear and guilt are two of the heaviest chains a human soul can carry. They are invisible, yet they can weigh down a person so completely that they move through life with shoulders bent and hearts weary. Fear whispers in the dark that you are not enough, that failure is waiting just around the corner. Guilt echoes from the past, reminding you of mistakes, regrets, words you wish you could take back, and moments you cannot undo. These two forces often work together, fear chaining us to the future, guilt chaining us to the past, leaving us unable to live freely in the present. Every person has experienced some taste of these chains. A teenager may fear not fitting in, while also carrying guilt for betraying a friend's trust. A parent may fear financial ruin while carrying guilt for not spending enough time with their children. A retired person may fear declining health while carrying guilt for opportunities wasted. Fear and guilt are not bound by age, culture, or class. They strike at the universal human heart, and if left unchecked, they distort everything. C.S. Lewis once described fear as a form of anticipation, but always anticipation of evil. That anticipation can paralyze. A student who fears failing a test may never even try. An entrepreneur who fears losing money may bury their talents instead of stepping forward. Fear does not simply protect us, it imprisons us. There is a healthy caution built into human design that keeps us from walking off cliffs, but fear goes beyond caution. It exaggerates danger, whispers lies, and convinces us that stepping forward will always end in disaster. Guilt carries its own voice. It reminds us of every broken promise, every cruel word spoken in anger, every moment of weakness. It replays memories like a film reel with no pause button. The problem is that guilt rarely operates in proportion. A small mistake from years ago can grow in the mind until it feels larger than life. People describe it as carrying a backpack filled with stones, each one representing something they wish they could undo. Over time, the backpack becomes so heavy that joy feels impossible. Science supports what faith traditions have long known. Fear and guilt not only wound the soul, but also damage the body. Chronic fear releases stress hormones like cortisol, which in excess can damage the immune system, impair memory, and raise the risk of heart disease. Guilt and shame have been linked to depression, anxiety, and even physical pain. People trapped in cycles of regret often report unexplained fatigue, headaches, and digestive issues. The body keeps the score of the heart's burdens. Yet there is a way out of these chains. God does not intend for His children to live bent beneath fear and guilt. In fact, one of the most repeated phrases in Scripture is, "Do not be afraid." That command is not given once or twice, but hundreds of times, as if God knew how deeply fear would grip the human race. And when it comes to guilt, the central promise of faith is forgiveness. The cross is not a symbol of condemnation, but of release, a declaration that guilt does not have the final word. Psychology affirms this truth in surprising ways. Therapists who work with trauma survivors often note that freedom begins the moment a person accepts that they are not defined by what has happened to them or by what they have done. Forgiveness, whether received or given, is one of the most powerful predictors of mental and physical health. Studies from the Mayo Clinic show that people who practice forgiveness experience lower levels of anxiety, stronger immune function, and improve heart health. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is liberation. Stories of fear and guilt being broken are some of the most moving accounts in human history. Think of the man who spent decades estranged from his family because of choices he made in youth. He lived with crushing guilt, believing reconciliation was impossible. When he finally mustered the courage to apologize and seek forgiveness, he discovered that love had been waiting all along. His chains did not just fall, they shattered, and the ripple healed not only him but generations after him. Another story can be found in countless recovery groups across the nation. Individuals who once feared they would never escape addiction speak openly about their past guilt. At first, shame silenced them. Then, as they encountered God's grace and the support of others, their voices grew stronger. They began to share their testimonies, turning guilt into a weapon against despair. What once enslaved them became a tool to bring hope to others. Their chains were broken, and in the breaking, they became chain breakers for those still bound. Fear thrives in darkness, and guilt thrives in silence. Bringing them into the light is often the first step toward freedom. This aligns perfectly with both faith and psychology. Confession in religious practice is not about humiliation, it is about release. To speak aloud, the things that haunt us weakens their grip. Cognitive behavioral therapy echoes this, teaching patients to confront distorted thoughts rather than letting them fester unchallenged. Light breaks chains. One of the most haunting effects of fear and guilt is the way they limit vision. A fearful person rarely dreams big because their imagination is hijacked by potential disaster. A guilty person rarely believes in new life because their identity is chained to their failures. Yet God specializes in restoring vision. He calls people out of caves and prisons, not only to survive, but to lead, to create, to flourish. Moses once fled in fear and lived with the guilt of murder, yet God transformed him into a leader of nations. Peter denied Christ in fear, yet was forgiven and became a cornerstone of the early church. Stories like these remind us that even the greatest failures are not disqualifications in God's eyes. Science, too, tells us that fear and guilt can be unlearned. Neural pathways that once reinforced panic or shame can be rewired through new experiences, beliefs, and practices. Prayer, meditation, gratitude journaling, and acts of service all build fresh connections in the brain, gradually loosening the grip of old chains. Spiritual practices are not mere rituals, they reshape the very architecture of thought. Fear and guilt often masquerade as permanent, whispering that nothing will change. Yet when people encounter the truth that they are loved, forgiven, and not alone, those lies lose power. A child who grows up in fear because of an abusive home may believe they are doomed to repeat the cycle. With God's grace and the support of wise mentors, that child can become an adult who builds a home filled with peace. A man consumed by guilt over betrayal may believe he is forever unworthy of love. With forgiveness, he can become a husband who learns to cherish and protect. Transformation does not erase the past, but it breaks its power to define the future. There's also an urgent reason to break these chains. Left unbroken, fear and guilt often metastasize into bitterness, anger, and self-destruction. People who cannot forgive themselves often sabotage relationships. Those consumed by fear often pass it on to their children, raising a new generation of anxious hearts. Breaking the chains is not just for personal peace, it is for legacy. A free person creates free families. Free families create healthy communities. For the one listening who feels those chains right now, know this, you are not alone. Countless others have walked through the valley of fear and guilt and found the way out. It begins by acknowledging the weight, by refusing to hide it any longer. It deepens when you invite God into that place, when you dare to believe that His forgiveness is real and His love is greater than your past. It grows stronger when you surround yourself with others who speak life instead of shame, who remind you that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk forward despite it. Picture a prisoner standing in a cell with the door unlocked, but never walking out. That is what life under fear and guilt looks like. The door has been opened by grace, yet many remain inside because they believe the chains are unbreakable. The invitation is to step out, to breathe fresh air, to feel the sun on your face again. It is not an easy step, but it is a possible one. Each day that you choose courage over fear, each moment you choose forgiveness over guilt, another link in the chain falls away. The most astonishing truth is that God Himself takes joy in breaking these chains. He is not reluctant, not stingy with grace. He delights in seeing His children set free. When fear crumbles, when guilt is washed away, when a heart once bound begins to sing again, heaven rejoices. Freedom is not only possible, it is celebrated. Hope and joy are among the most powerful forces in the human experience. They are not luxuries, not small decorations on an already good life, but the very fuel that allows people to endure hardship, overcome obstacles, and live with strength. When hope fades, the will to fight weakens. When joy disappears, the soul begins to dry out, even if the body keeps moving. Yet when hope is present, even in tiny flickers, people can endure storms that would otherwise break them. When joy rises within a person, even in difficult seasons, they find themselves able to sing in the darkness. Scientists have studied this mystery for decades. At Harvard and Yale, research into longevity has revealed that people who live with hope not only enjoy stronger mental health, but also live longer, healthier lives. Optimistic individuals, those who expect good in the future, show lower risks of heart disease, stronger immune systems, and even quicker recovery from surgery. Joy itself has measurable biological effects. Laughter releases endorphins. Gratitude rewires the brain for resilience. Acts of joy lower cortisol, the stress hormone that corrodes the body when left unchecked. What faith traditions have long declared, that a cheerful heart is good medicine, is now being confirmed by medical journals. Hope is not simply optimism. Optimism is the tendency to see the glass half full, to assume things will work out. Hope is deeper. It is the conviction that meaning exists even in suffering, that light still shines even when darkness covers everything in sight. Hope is not blind to reality. A hopeful cancer patient does not ignore their diagnosis, but they believe there is purpose still in their days, whether in healing or in legacy. A hopeful parent raising children in turbulent times does not pretend the world is safe, but they believe their children can still grow into courageous, compassionate adults. Hope gives vision when sight is dim. Joy is equally profound. It is not mere happiness. Happiness depends on circumstances, the job promotion, the new relationship, the sunny weather. Joy runs deeper. Joy is the calm river beneath the waves, steady even when the surface rages. People with joy can grieve and laugh in the same breath because their foundation is not in fleeting conditions, but in something eternal. Faith teaches that joy is a fruit of the Spirit, a gift from God that does not vanish when the paycheck disappears or when the doctor delivers bad news. It is rooted in the presence of God, who never leaves, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Psychologists studying resilience after tragedy often discover that those who bounce back strongest are not necessarily the wealthiest or most educated, but those who carry an inner reservoir of hope and joy. Survivors of natural disasters who believe life can still hold beauty recover faster. People emerging from war who hold on to joy in small things, like singing, cooking, or telling stories, heal deeper wounds. The soul's capacity for hope and joy is what allows humans to rise again after devastation. Stories bring this truth to life. There was once a young athlete who dreamed of playing at the highest level. Years of training, sweat, and sacrifice seemed to be leading to that dream, until a devastating injury crushed the possibility. The body healed, but the dream seemed lost. For months, he sat in silence, drowning in despair. Then something shifted. He began to pray, to believe that his life was not over just because his career had ended. He discovered a new calling, mentoring younger athletes, teaching them about both the game and the deeper lessons of perseverance. His joy returned, not because circumstances had improved, but because he realized purpose is greater than position. That shift came from hope, and it blossomed into joy. There are countless others. A widow who once sat in the quiet of her home, overwhelmed by grief, began to keep a journal of gratitude. At first, it felt impossible. She could only write one word, sunlight. The next day, she wrote two, sunlight and breath. Slowly, her list grew longer. Months later, her grief remained, but no longer defined her. Joy had crept back in, not by denying pain, but by refusing to let pain have the final word. Gratitude rewired her mind, and God's presence renewed her heart. Hope and joy are contagious. A hopeful teacher can inspire a classroom to believe in their own potential. A joyful nurse can bring comfort to a patient facing their worst day. A hopeful parent can pass resilience to their children. Neuroscientists studying mirror neurons have shown that emotions can spread socially, like fire passing from torch to torch. When one person chooses joy, others are lifted. When one person dares to hope, others catch courage. The world is changed not just by leaders with power, but by ordinary people whose hope and joy ripple outward. Faith deepens this truth. The hope offered by God is not fragile, not dependent on politics, bank accounts, or human approval. It is anchored in promises that do not fade. Scripture says, "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure." Anchors are not meant to remove the storm. They are meant to hold the ship steady while the waves rage. That is what divine hope does. It secures the soul when life tries to drag it away. And the joy of God is not shallow laughter, it is strength. The joy of the Lord is your strength, declares the ancient text. Joy becomes energy, courage, endurance. It is no wonder those who carry it seem unshakable. Children display this power in ways adults often forget. A child can find joy in the simplest thing. A bubble floating in the air, a dog wagging its tail, a song sung off-key. That childlike joy is not naivety, it is wisdom. It reveals that life is still filled with wonder, even when bills pile high and responsibilities weigh heavy. Adults who learn to reclaim that joy often discover freedom. Singing loudly in the car, dancing in the kitchen, laughing at small absurdities, these are not silly acts, they are rebellion against despair. They are declarations that the soul still belongs to God, not to fear. Hope and joy also shape the way the brain perceives the future. A person who believes tomorrow holds goodness is more likely to make healthy choices today. They will exercise, invest in relationships, learn new skills because they expect to live into tomorrow. Without hope, apathy sets in, and destructive habits creep closer. Joy works the same way. A joyful heart looks for opportunities, sees doors instead of walls, embraces challenges instead of shrinking back. This is why successful recovery programs emphasize both hope and joy as essential ingredients for long-term change. When guilt tries to crush, joy lifts. When fear tries to suffocate, hope breathes. These twin gifts break cycles of despair. They are not abstract, they are practical. Hope makes a cancer patient show up for one more round of treatment. Joy gives an exhausted mother the strength to sing her child to sleep. Hope allows a discouraged student to study for another exam. Joy carries a weary worker through one more shift. These daily victories add up to transformed lives. One of the most inspiring aspects of hope and joy is that they can rise in the darkest places. Prisoners of war have sung songs through bars. Survivors of famine have shared scraps of bread with laughter. Victims of injustice have marched with hymns on their lips. These are not trivial displays, they are profound testimonies that nothing can conquer the human spirit when anchored in God's gift of hope and joy. Hope is also future-oriented. It lifts the eyes beyond the present struggle toward what is possible. Faith intensifies this by pointing hope toward eternity. Pain may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Death itself is not the end, but a doorway. Such hope is unshakable because it is not built on circumstances, but on promises that cannot be broken. This kind of hope gives people the courage to stand tall in front of death, to forgive enemies, to risk love again after heartbreak. Joy, too, looks forward, but it also saturates the present. It is the ability to taste goodness right here, right now, even in small things. Joy is sipping coffee slowly, watching the sunrise, holding a child's hand, praying in silence, sharing a meal. It is discovering that life, even when imperfect, is still sacred. Faith intensifies this by teaching that joy flows from God's presence, not from the absence of problems. When His presence is near, joy becomes a steady song beneath the noise of life. Imagine the strength of a life saturated with both hope and joy. That person cannot be easily defeated. They may stumble, but they rise again. They may grieve, but they still smile. They may lose, but they never quit. Their presence itself becomes light in a dark room, a reminder that despair does not have to be the last word. This is the transformation God offers, not a denial of hardship, but a deeper reality that hardship cannot extinguish. For the one listening today who feels hope slipping and joy gone, know this: it can return. It begins small like a spark in the ashes. Start with gratitude, even for the smallest thing. The breath in your lungs, the sound of a bird, the hand of a friend. Speak it aloud. Write it down. Let your soul remember that goodness still exists. Ask God for the gift of joy again, not as a feeling to chase, but as a strength to carry you. Dare to believe that tomorrow can hold better things, even if today feels broken. Hope and joy are not rewards for the strong. They are gifts for the weary, offered freely by the one who delights to renew his children. Courage is often misunderstood. People imagine it as a grand heroic act, a soldier running into battle or a firefighter charging into flames. But courage in everyday life rarely looks like that. Courage is quieter. It shows up in moments when no one is watching, when you stand at the crossroads of who you have been and who you could become. It is the choice to step away from patterns that are comfortable, even if destructive, and step toward a path that is unknown but filled with possibility. That choice is terrifying because the old path feels familiar, even if it leads to emptiness. The new path feels uncertain, even if it holds life. To walk it requires a kind of strength that comes not just from within, but from the one who promises to walk alongside you. Every person, at some point, senses the call to change direction. It might come after years of living in habits that drain life. It might arrive suddenly, after a crisis or a loss. A doctor gives a diagnosis, and suddenly the way you have been living no longer feels sustainable. A marriage begins to crumble, and you realize something must shift. A career feels hollow despite outward success, and deep down you know you are meant for something different. That moment is holy because it reveals the gap between where you are and where you could be. And in that gap lies the invitation to courage. Psychologists who study habit formation speak of the brain's resistance to change. Neural pathways carved over years create grooves like deep ruts on a dirt road. The wheels of behavior slip into those ruts automatically, making change feel like driving uphill in the mud. The first weeks of building a new habit can feel impossible because the brain craves the comfort of the familiar, even if the familiar is harmful. That is why courage is not just a vague idea, but a real force. It is the willingness to endure discomfort long enough for new pathways to form. Neuroscientists have found that with repeated practice, the brain literally rewires itself. What once felt impossible can become second nature, but only if the first courageous steps are taken. Faith speaks to this with ancient words. The scriptures say, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That is not poetic language only, it is psychological truth wrapped in divine promise. To walk a new path is to refuse conformity to old patterns and to embrace renewal, even when the process feels like tearing apart what is familiar. Transformation begins in the mind, and it requires courage to believe that God is able to make all things new. Stories help us see this clearly. A woman I once met had spent decades in the grip of alcohol. It was not that she wanted to destroy her life. It was that the bottle had become her escape. Her marriage fractured, her children pulled away, her health began to collapse. Then came the night when she sat alone in her car, staring at herself in the mirror. She whispered, "This is not who I am." That sentence became her turning point. She joined a support group, sought counseling, prayed for strength. The road was not easy. There were relapses, nights of shame, days of exhaustion. Yet each morning she chose again to walk the new path. Years later, she told me, "The hardest step was the first one. The night I decided to get out of the car and do something different. After that, every other step was still hard, but it was possible." Courage lit the spark, and God sustained the flame. Courage is also required in relationships. Many people remain in unhealthy friendships or toxic partnerships because leaving feels unbearable. Loneliness is feared more than mistreatment. Yet walking a new path sometimes means creating boundaries, saying no to what has drained your soul, and opening space for healthier connections. That kind of courage often comes with tears. It may look like a middle-aged man deciding to reconcile with a sibling after years of silence. It may look like a young woman breaking free from a manipulative partner. It may look like a retired couple daring to move across the country to be near their grandchildren, leaving behind the safety of their routines. Each choice requires faith that God is not only closing one chapter, but writing a better one. Science backs this up. Researchers studying motivation have found that meaning is one of the strongest drivers of courage. When a person connects their change to a deeper sense of purpose, they are more likely to endure the discomfort of transition. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Purpose fuels courage. Faith magnifies this by offering a divine why. You are not changing paths only for self-improvement. You are aligning with God's design, stepping into the destiny He has set before you. That conviction provides strength when willpower fails. There is also a kind of fear that protects us, but there is another kind that enslaves us. Healthy fear tells us not to step into traffic. Toxic fear tells us not to step into our future. Toxic fear whispers that you are too old to start again, too young to make a difference, too broken to be healed, too ordinary to matter. Courage answers that whisper with action. It is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be paralyzed by it. Faith transforms courage by reminding us that fear does not have the final say. Fear not, God says again and again, not because life is safe, but because He is near. One of the most inspiring aspects of courage is that it multiplies. When one person dares to walk a new path, others watching are encouraged to do the same. A father who quits smoking inspires his children to live healthier. A student who stands up to bullying gives classmates the bravery to speak. A grandmother who returns to school in her 60s shows her family that it is never too late to grow. Courage ripples outward, igniting change beyond the original step. Joy is often discovered along this new path. At first, the road feels lonely and steep. The old comforts call out, tempting you to return. But as days turn into weeks, as new rhythms settle in, a surprising lightness begins to emerge. The woman who once felt chained to her past begins to laugh again. The man who once drowned in routine discovers creativity bubbling up. The teenager who once felt trapped by mistakes begins to see doors opening. Courage is the doorway to this joy. Without it, people remain stuck in cycles of despair. With it, they find the joy of freedom. Faith provides the strongest reason to keep walking. Jesus once said, "Narrow is the road that leads to life, and few find it." That road requires courage because it is not the popular choice. It may lead away from the crowd, away from comfort, away from ease. Yet it leads to life, abundant, overflowing, eternal life. Walking that road means trusting that God's way is better, even when it costs. It means stepping into forgiveness instead of bitterness, into generosity instead of greed, into love instead of indifference. Each step demands courage, but each step brings life. I think of a man who worked for decades in a corporate job that drained him. On paper, he was successful. He had money, status, respect. Inside, he was dying. He felt called to leave and start a nonprofit serving inner-city youth, but the thought terrified him. He feared financial loss, failure, ridicule. One day, after months of wrestling, he prayed, "God, I will step if you will catch me." That prayer marked his shift. He resigned, started the nonprofit, and faced years of struggle. Yet today, hundreds of young lives have been transformed because he chose courage. His life, once hollow, is now rich with purpose. Walking a new path is rarely about perfection. It is about persistence. A person might stumble 10 times, but courage means rising 11. Courage does not promise an easy road, but it promises a meaningful one. God does not demand flawless steps. He delights in faithful ones. He rejoices when His children dare to leave behind what destroys them and embrace what gives life. For anyone listening who feels trapped, the invitation is real. You may feel bound to habits that seem unbreakable, relationships that feel suffocating, routines that feel endless. Yet there's always a new path. It may not be clear, it may not be easy, but it exists. And the same God who parted seas, who raised the dead, who turned despair into songs, offers to walk it with you. Courage is not something you must manufacture alone. It is something God breathes into you. When He says, "Be strong and courageous," He is not commanding you to find strength in yourself. He is offering His strength. The beauty of courage is that it does not only change your story, it changes generations. A parent who chooses a new path sets their children on a different trajectory. A friend who chooses courage creates ripples of inspiration in their circle. A community shaped by courageous individuals becomes fertile soil for transformation. Courage is contagious, and once it begins, it rarely stops with one life. Walking a new path is both terrifying and exhilarating. It feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if the bridge will hold. Yet step by step, the ground appears beneath your feet. You discover strength you did not know you had, friends you did not expect to meet, resources you never thought possible. And in those moments, you realize that courage was not about the absence of fear, but about trusting that God is greater than fear. So if you are standing today at that crossroad, if your heart knows you cannot stay where you are, then let this be the moment you choose courage. Let this be the moment you take one small step toward the life waiting for you. It may feel like walking into darkness, but there is light ahead. It may feel like dying to who you were, but it is the birth of who you are meant to be. And as you walk, know that you do not walk alone. Time is the most fragile possession you hold, and yet it is the one thing that most people treat as though it will never run out. People often imagine that change can wait until tomorrow. They think of their health and promise themselves that someday they will eat better, exercise, or rest. They think of their relationships and whisper that forgiveness will come later, reconciliation will come later, kindness will come later. They think of their faith and say there will be a moment when they have more time, when life slows down, when the noise quiets enough to listen to God. But the truth is that tomorrow is not guaranteed, and the gift of life is always given in the present tense. The invitation of God to step into new life is not written with the word someday. It is always written with the word today. Psychologists who study procrastination have discovered that people delay not because they do not care, but because the human brain is comforted by the illusion of more time. The future feels like an endless ocean stretching out, so it feels safe to push decisions forward. Yet this same tendency is why dreams die unrealized, why families break without reconciliation, why individuals live decades with the quiet ache of never stepping into who they were meant to be. Procrastination kills transformation because it robs the only place where action is possible, the present. God's invitation is always a present call. The voice of heaven does not say, "Come back in a year when you are ready." It says, "Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your heart." Science also affirms the urgency of the present. Studies of habit formation reveal that the longer a person delays a decision to change, the deeper the grooves of the old pattern become. Like a river cutting through rock, behaviors etch themselves into the brain until they feel nearly immovable. But when a person acts quickly, the brain begins carving new pathways almost immediately. Neuroplasticity is strongest when paired with urgency. Delay weakens resolve, action strengthens it. This is why so many great shifts in human history began not after years of waiting, but after a single moment of decisive choice. The first step opens the door to the second. There are countless stories of people who live with regret because they postponed change. A man once spoke of his father, who had carried bitterness for 40 years. Each time the son asked if he would forgive his brother, the father answered, "Not now, maybe someday." That someday never came. He died with words unsaid, and the family carried wounds that could have been healed. Contrast that with another man who one afternoon picked up the phone and called his estranged son. The conversation was awkward and painful, but it was a beginning. Over time, walls came down, and the relationship was restored. The difference between those two stories was not knowledge, not resources, not even willingness. It was timing. One chose to act today. The other chose to wait until tomorrow, and tomorrow never arrived. Faith paints this urgency in stark colors. Scripture is filled with the word today. Today is the day of salvation. Give us this day our daily bread. If you hear His voice today, do not harden your hearts. God meets His people not in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's fantasies, but in the immediacy of now. The enemy of the soul does not always tempt with dramatic evil. More often, he tempts with delay. He whispers, "Yes, you should change, but not yet. Yes, you should forgive, but wait a little longer. Yes, you should pray, but do it tomorrow." Delay is enough to steal destiny. That is why God speaks in urgency, not to frighten, but to awaken. Consider the story of a woman who lived her entire adult life in routine. She worked long hours, came home, ate, watched television, and repeated the cycle for decades. She always said she wanted to volunteer, to travel, to reconnect with her siblings, to deepen her faith. She assumed there would be time. Then her health collapsed suddenly, and she found herself in a hospital bed. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I thought I had years, but all I had was today." Those words echoed like a warning bell. Yet even in that bed, she chose a new path. She began calling her siblings, began praying, began writing letters to people she had ignored. Though her body was failing, her spirit came alive because she realized the invitation was still open. It had always been open. It was waiting for her today. There is a kind of fear that paralyzes people from taking the invitation of today. They worry that they are not ready, not worthy, not equipped. They imagine that change requires a perfect environment, more money, more support, more strength. But the truth is that no one ever feels fully ready. Readiness is not a prerequisite for transformation. It is the result of it. A person stepping onto a new path finds strength in the stepping. Faith declares that God provides as we move, not before. When Israel left Egypt, they did not see the Red Sea part before they walked. They stepped toward the water, and then the miracle came. That is how God works. He calls you today, and as you step, He makes a way. Psychology speaks of the present bias, the tendency to prefer immediate comfort over long-term reward. That is why diets break at midnight, why gym memberships go unused, why people stay in unhealthy patterns. The present moment is powerful, but it can be misused. Faith redeems the present moment by showing that the greatest reward is not only in the distant future, but begins now. When you choose to forgive today, you feel peace today. When you choose to pray today, you feel strength today. When you choose to walk with God today, you begin to taste joy today. The present becomes not just the place of decision, but the place of reward. The beauty of God's invitation is that it is deeply personal. It is not a generic call shouted into the air. It is a voice speaking to you in your unique story. To the teenager struggling with identity, it says, "You are loved now." To the parent overwhelmed with stress, it says, "I will give you rest now." To the elder who feels forgotten, it says, "I am with you now." This invitation is not postponed until you are stronger or until life is calmer. It meets you in the middle of chaos, in the middle of weakness, in the middle of imperfection. It does not demand that you climb a mountain first. It asks only that you take one step today. Every great transformation begins in a moment. A smoker takes a deep breath and throws away the pack. A broken family shares a meal together for the first time in years. A lonely soul kneels by their bed and whispers a prayer. That moment, small as it seems, carries eternal weight. God specializes in turning today's small decisions into tomorrow's miracles. But without the first step today, the miracle is delayed. Think about your own life. What have you been postponing? What dreams have you buried under the phrase, "someday"? What healing have you delayed because fear told you it could wait? What calling have you ignored because you believed tomorrow would be easier? The invitation is in front of you right now. Not when you retire, not when the kids leave home, not when the bills are paid. Right now, the breath in your lungs is proof that you have been given today. That breath is an invitation to use it well. There is a tenderness in this urgency. God is not a tyrant demanding instant obedience. He is a father longing for his children to come home. He knows the damage that waiting causes. He sees the years wasted in bitterness, the nights wasted in regret, the health wasted in stress. His invitation is urgent because his love is urgent. He wants you to taste freedom now, not after another decade of wandering. He wants you to know joy now, not after another cycle of disappointment. He wants you to experience his presence now, not only on your deathbed. Imagine a door standing open. Behind it is a feast, laughter, light, purpose, healing. The door has been open for years, but many stand outside, peeking in, promising themselves that one day they will step through. Some wait for a better outfit, others for a better mood, others for a sign that the time is right. But the invitation is not complicated. It is simply this: the door is open, walk through today. If you hesitate, you risk missing the feast. If you enter, you begin to taste life in its fullness. There are people who stepped into the invitation of today and found their lives transformed. A man battling depression decided one morning to go for a walk and pray instead of staying in bed. That small step began a habit that changed his mental health. A woman battling bitterness decided to forgive her ex-husband in prayer, even though he never apologized. That moment lifted a weight from her chest that years of anger had not removed. A young adult living in constant distraction decided to put down their phone during meals and actually talk with their family. That small decision restored connection and love. These are not grand gestures. They are simple choices made today, and they carry power beyond what words can describe. The tragedy is not failure. The tragedy is delay. Failure can be redeemed, mistakes can be forgiven, losses can be restored. Delay robs you of time you can never reclaim. One day becomes 1 year becomes 10, and before long, the chance feels gone. That is why God's voice is insistent on the word today. Not to pressure you into fear, but to awaken you into life. Every day you wait, the old path deepens its roots. Every day you choose today, the new path grows stronger. Hope is real, joy is real, peace is real, transformation is real, but they are only ever experienced in the present. The past is memory, the future is possibility, but the present is reality. God invites you into that reality with open arms. He says, I stand at the door and knock. The question is not if he is near. The question is if you will open today. So let this be the moment. Let this be the day when you stop promising yourself that someday you will change. Let this be the day you choose forgiveness, the day you choose health, the day you choose faith, the day you choose courage. Let this be the day you step onto the new path God has been holding out to you. Because all you truly have is today, and today is enough. Every heartbeat that passes is a reminder that life is not a rehearsal. You don't get to rewind the clock and relive this same moment again. This is your chance right now to decide who you will be, what you will pursue, and how deeply you will live. Some people will walk away from messages like this and let the weight of routine swallow them again. They will nod, they will agree, and then they will keep waiting for a better time. But the truth is, time does not bargain. It does not pause for our hesitation. The silence between your breaths is where destinies are either built or buried. Think of the cost of waiting. Opportunities never seized, relationships never healed, joy never experienced because fear had a louder voice than faith. That thought should scare you, not to freeze you, but to wake you up. Fear has a purpose when it is used to remind you that wasting your life is the only real danger. And then comes the fire of motivation, the spark that says you were not born to drift aimlessly. You were born to break patterns that enslave those before you, to stand taller than the voices that doubted you, to rise into the version of yourself that carries courage, wisdom, and unshakable faith. The patterns of your life are either chains or wings. The chain is built when you choose comfort over growth, when you let tomorrow steal today, when you silence the voice calling you higher. The wings are built when you step into risk, when you let go of bitterness, when you choose today over someday. The same moment can either keep you trapped or lift you toward freedom, and that choice is always yours. Think carefully. The invitation you've heard in every part of this message is not distant, not abstract, not reserved for someone more talented, more holy, or more perfect. It is calling you with all your flaws, all your fears, all your scars. This is the wisdom hidden in the fabric of life. The very place where you feel weakest is often the exact place where transformation begins. So here is the sole truth. This is not about tomorrow. It is about now. The door is open, the voice is calling, and the clock is ticking. Whether you feel ready or not, whether you have support or not, whether you understand the entire path or not, you have been handed today. And today is enough to begin. When the final words fade and the screen goes dark, don't let this moment slip into the background noise of your life. Do something with it. Choose one act of courage, one act of love, one act of faith, and step into it. Because years from now, you will either tell a story of how you waited, or you will tell a story of how you began. And the difference will be decided right here, right now, today.